Nine times, nine separate occasions. An officer sat across a table from the most wanted man in Britain and decided he wasn't the one. This was the largest manhunt the country had ever run. 2.5 million working hours. 250,000 people questioned everything a nation can throw at a single problem. And the killer was already inside the files, flagged, interviewed, sitting in a folder with his name on it, while the murders carried on. The part that has haunted detectives ever since isn't that they missed him, it's that they had him. And something about the way the whole investigation was thinking handed him back the keys 9 times over. I want to walk you through what happened, not the murders, the mistake. Because the mistake has a shape, a precise, almost mechanical shape. And decades later, when engineers built a certain kind of artificial intelligence, the kind quietly deciding things inside your bank right now, they designed it on purpose to be incapable of making this exact mistake. They just never knew the lesson was already written in a police incident room in Yorkshire. I am Dr. Shubhrajit Nag and welcome to Train. By the end of this video, you'll see the shape too, and you won't be able to unsee it. It starts in the autumn of 1975. Leeds. A mother of 4, Wilma McCain, is killed walking home at night. No motive anyone can find. No suspect. No connection to a single person in her life. Then it happens again and again. Different towns. Leeds, Bradford, Huddersfield, across to Manchester. Different women. The same hand. By 1977, the north of England is living under something it doesn't have a word for yet. Women stop going out after dark. Fathers wait at bus stops for daughters. A whole region holds its breath, and the police built the biggest investigation in the history of the country to catch him. Here's the part that nobody dramatizes, because it isn't dramatic. The investigation didn't fail for lack of clues. It failed because it drowned in them. This is 1977. No databases, no search box. Every tip, every sighting, every interview, every car number plate is written by hand onto a paper index card and filed into a cabinet in a room in Leeds. And the tips pour in, thousands of it, then tens of thousands. The cabinets fill, then the rooms fill. At one point, the floor of that incident room has to be physically reinforced with extra supports because the sheer weight of paper threatens to come through the ceiling of the offices below. Sit with what that does to a search. To know whether a new tip connects to an old one, a detective has to remember the old one exists, then find it by hand in an ocean of a million cards. If the same name turned up on 2 different lists, nobody could say it, unless a human happened to notice. And humans buried under that much paper mostly didn't notice. So hold on to this first image. One enormous pile of everything with no way to see any part of it clearly. It matters more than it looks. Now, here's what makes this case almost unbearable to look at. The killer wasn't a ghost. He left threads, real ones. And more than one of them led straight to a lorry driver from Bradford named Peter Sutcliffe. Thread 1. October 1977. A woman named Jean Jordan is murdered in Manchester. In her handbag, police find a £5 note, brand new, barely handled. A new note carries a serial number, and a serial number has a paper trail. They trace it to one batch, sent to one bank, paid out as wages by a small handful of local farms on one particular weekend. In a single step, the suspect pool collapses from millions of men to a few thousand employees. And on that list of a few thousand is Peter Sutcliffe. They go to his house, they interview him. His wife confirms he was home. He's polite, ordinary, married, unemployed, and unremarkable. They cross him off and move on. Thread 2. The killer was finding victims in red light district, so the police ran quiet operations of their own. logging the number plates of cars seen cruising those streets night after night. Sutcliffe's car was logged in those areas not once, repeatedly, across more than one city. So now he has been singled out by two completely separate methods. The money trail says, look at this man. The car surveillance says, look at this man. Two independent roads arriving at the same front door in Bradford. He gets interviewed again and again, 9 times in all, by different officers in different contexts over 3 years. 9 different people looked at this man, and the system around them was not blind. The right answer was sitting inside it the whole time. So why did every one of them let him go? Because by 1979, the entire investigation had fallen in love with one clue, and that one clue swore Peter Sutcliffe was innocent. In 1978, letters begin arriving, handwritten, signed Jack the Ripper, taunting the detective leading the hunt by name. Then, in 1979 June, a package, a cassette tape, 3.5 minutes of a man's voice. The man on the tape has a thick, particular accent from Wareside, from around Sunderland in the northeast, and he speaks straight to the lead detective. I am Jack. I see you are having no luck catching me. The detective leading it all, George Oldfield, becomes certain. This is him. This is the killer's voice. They play the tape at press conferences. They broadcast it in cinemas, in pubs, on the radio. They put it on billboards. They set up a phone line so the public can ring him and just listen to him speak. And in that moment, the whole investigation grows a single dominant filter. One question that now sits in front of every other question. Does he sound like the tape? Peter Sutcliffe did not sound like the tape. Born and raised around Bradford, Broad Yorkshire, nothing like Wareside. So when officers sat across from him with the money trail pointing at him, with the car sightings pointing at him, one fact overrode all of it. Wrong voice, not him. The accent became a master key that locked the right man out of his own investigation 9 times. And here is the cruelty of it. The tape was a hoax. A man with no connection to the murders, unmasked years later through a DNA match as John Humble from Sunderland, had sent the letters and the tape as a sick game. A fantasist, never within 100 miles of the killings. One fake voice and the largest manhunt in the country quietly reorganized itself around it. Every clue that didn't fit the voice got demoted, including the clues that happened to be true. While they chased an accent, the murders went on. Women who were alive the first time Sutcliffe was interviewed, students, mothers, a teenager walking home from a night out were dead within 2 years, killed by a man the system had already made and dismissed over how he spoke. This is what happens when you let one feature decide everything. So, how did it finally end? Not with the manhunt, not the index cards, not the tape line, not the 2.5 million hours. January 1981, Sheffield. 2 ordinary patrol officers run a check on a car parked in a quiet spot with a woman inside. The plates are false, lifted from another vehicle. That's the entire crime they are looking at, a number plate offense. They take the driver in. He gives a false name. Something nags at one of them, who drives back to where the car had been and finds in the dark where the man had stepped away to relieve himself a hammer and a knife. Within 2 days, Peter Sutcliffe confessed to everything. The most expensive, most exhaustive investigation in British history did not catch the Yorkshire Ripper. 2 officers checking a license plate did by accident. He was convicted of 13 murders and 7 attempted murders. And almost at once, the government ordered an inquiry, not into him, into the hunt, into how a system this large, this well-funded, holding the right answer in its own hands 9 separate times, could fail this completely. The report that came back reads, if you tilt your head like an engineering postmortem. It found 2 failures so specific that years later they read like a blueprint for exactly what not to build. Which brings me to the thing I promised you at the start. Everything I told you is a true story about a police investigation. It is almost beat for beat the reason one of the most trusted tools in modern artificial intelligence is built the way it is. It's called the random forest. And once you see how it works, you'll realize it was designed by people who understood, maybe without even hearing this case, exactly how the Ripper investigation failed. Start with the smallest piece. Say you want a machine to make a yes or no call. Is this transaction fraud? Is this scan something to worry about? The simplest way is to have it ask a chain of questions, each answer narrowing things down like a flowchart. That's a decision tree. And a single decision tree has the exact weakness the investigation had. Give it one big pile of everything and let it ask whatever it likes. And it does what George Oldfield did. It finds the one clue that seems to explain the most, and it leans on that clue so hard that the moment something doesn't fit, it's full. It falls in love with the accent. So you don't build one tree, you build hundreds, and you force them to disagree on purpose. Here's the genius of it, and it's two rules that come straight out of that incident room. Rule 1: no tree sees all the data. Remember the room full of paper? One giant pile of everything, impossible to read clearly. A random forest does the opposite. It hands each tree only a small, random handful of the cases. One tree learns from one slice of reality, the next from a different slice. None of them drowns. None of them is ever holding the whole impossible file. Rule 2: no tree may look at every clue. And this is the one that would have changed everything. At each question, a tree isn't allowed to consider all the evidence. It's handed only a random few clues to choose from. Sit with how backwards that sounds. You deliberately blindfold each tree to most of the evidence in every step. Why would you ever cripple your own system like that? Because of the accent. In the real hunt, one clue, the voice was so loud, so seemingly powerful, that every officer reached for it and let it bury everything else. They all made the same move. They all leaned on the same clue. And so they all made the same mistake 9 times. Rule 2 makes that impossible. Most of your trees aren't even allowed to look at the loud clue. They are forced to ask about other things. The money trail, the car sightings, the threads the real investigation shrugged off. So a few trees might still get seduced by the accent, but most never see it. They are busy noticing what actually led to Bradford. And then the forest votes. A new case comes in. Every tree gives its own verdict. And this is the part that matters most, without talking to the others. No tree argues another one round. No loud voice in the room talks everyone into agreement. Each decides alone, and you simply count the votes. Now, watch what that independence buys you. If all your decision makers share one blind spot, 9 officers all trusting the same tape, their mistakes line up. They all point the wrong way at once, and the errors stack instead of cancelling. That's Yorkshire. Everyone wrong in the same direction. But if you're hundreds of trees, each saw different cases and were forced to weigh different clues, their mistakes scatter. One tree's error tips left, another tips right. Count the votes, and the scattered errors mostly cancel, while the real signal, the thing most of them independently noticed, survives. That's the whole trick. Not smarter voters. Voters whose mistakes refuse to agree with each other. Someone proved this works long before computers existed. In 1907, a scientist named Francis Galton watched 800 people at a country fair guess the weight of an ox. Farmers, clerks, children dragged along by parents. Nearly every single guess was wrong. But the average of all 800 landed within 1 pound of the true weight, beating almost every expert in the crowd. Because the guesses were independent and their errors cancelled. A random forest is Galton's crowd, engineered. Hundreds of unremarkable guesses kept independent on purpose, voting. And the forest verdict is almost always more reliable than the best single tree inside it. Which is why this design lives everywhere you can't afford to be wrong. The instant your card does something out of character, a forest of those trees votes on whether it's fraud, each looking at a different silver of your behavior, none able to fix it on one signal, all of it in milliseconds. Hospitals use them to flag risk hiding in patient data. Insurers, scientists, the filter deciding what's spam, forests, voting all day. Everywhere. And every one of them runs on a rule the Yorkshire police learned the hardest way imaginable. Never let one loud clue run the whole room. The inquiry said the same thing in plainer language. 2 failures. A central system so overloaded it couldn't see its own connections. And an investigation that gave one piece of evidence too much weight and let it bury the rest. Fix those 2 things, the report said, and the right answer would have surfaced on its own. Fixing those exact 2 things is the definition of a random forest. Don't pile everything into one place. Don't let one clue dominate. Keep your voters independent. Then trust the vote. 9 times a man sat across a table from the answer and nobody saw it. Because everyone in that building was looking through the same blind spot at the same moment. The tool we built so that never happens again isn't smarter than those detectives. It works by refusing to let all of its eyes point the same way. That's a random forest. A room full of imperfect voters who aren't allowed to agree too easily. It turns out that's not a weakness. For 13 women in the north of England, it would would have been everything. This channel finds the AI hiding inside stories you already know. If this one stayed with you, subscribe. The next one is about a cipher nobody could crack and the strange kind of attention that finally cracked. See you in the next video.